Hey Wargamers, today we're going to start talking about Farsight, Crisis of Faith by Phil Kelly. This is the first in a series of book club-like videos where I will discuss the book chapter by chapter. I think it's going to be interesting if you haven't read the book. I think if you have read the book, if you're following along, reading the same chapters that I'm reading as you watch the video, it'll be more stimulating, but either way, hopefully this is something that's at least enjoyable, no matter if you've read the book or not. So read along with me. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please, if you have read the book, no spoilers. Of course, like things that are in the codex are fair game, right? Like those are things that everyone should know. But if you read the story and have things specific to the story in the book, please don't put those in the comments. Just common courtesy type stuff. So I think this is going to be something where there's going to be between 4 and 8 videos. I'm not totally sure, just based on natural breaking points in the story. Today we're going to talk about the prologue, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Originally I was thinking it was just going to be the prologue, but really chapters 1, chapter 2 also are largely just exposition. And so we're going to cram them all together. We're going to do a video on those today. But I haven't done this type of thing before. I've never done a book club type video. That's a departure from our normal hobby and tabletop oriented videos. So let me know what you think in the comments below about the format and the structure. Any type of constructive criticism is greatly appreciated because it's new to me. So, and this is also the first Black library book that I've ever read. So excited to see how it pans out. Maybe this is the beginning of a whole new chapter, so to say. So let's pick up with the prologue. Half blind with panic, Farsight eye-swept his fusion blaster around in a kill vector before realizing the gun system was no longer there. The Malachite's axe came down hard, an executioner's blow. Farsight raised his shield once more. 3% left now, and already dark gray. The next brutal swing would split his battlesuit like cordwood. The giant's hoof stamped down again, buckling the XV8's plasma rifle and rendering the shield beneath it completely useless. The heavy axe rose again, starlight glinting from its edge. In that brief moment, the galaxy seemed to contract to a single causal point. Farsight unfurled a 4-fingered hand from his battlesuit with a swift clack of pistons. He scrabbled at the fallen statue and yanked the immense sword from its stony grip. Then the killing blow fell. So that's the end of the prologue, and by that you can tell that the prologue starts us off in a great action scene of Farsight on the planet Arthas Moloch. Now, this is exciting because Arthas Moloch is a really important place for Farsight, as we see in the prologue, and presumably as we will see further on in the novel. This is where he gets the Dawnblade, and the Dawnblade is his iconic weapon that essentially steals life energy from his fallen foes. This is how Farsight is essentially immortal in the fluff. This is how Farsight can live far longer than other Tau because his weapon is alien. It's a Xenos technology that basically keeps him alive. The more he kills, the longer he lives. And of course, that really plays into the flavor and the ideology of Farsight as this kind of combat machine. Arthas Moloch is also the origin of the Amulet of Arthas Moloch, which is the only thing that gives Tau on the tabletop some sort of psychic defense. It's been really powerful in previous editions, currently not so much, but the Amulet of Arthas Moloch is mentioned in the book right here, at least in passing. So that is pretty exciting. We're on the planet where everything really comes to fruition for Farsight, and he really steps into the character that we know from the Codex. So the prologue here basically sets us up to expect that as at least part of the story, that we get to this pivotal point where Farsight gets the Dawnblade, where Farsight really becomes Farsight as we know him. So that's pretty exciting, and anyone who is familiar with Farsight and with the Tau Codex should be pretty hooked just by this prologue. Now, Arthas Moloch is also where Farsight first encounters demons. Here he's fighting against Khorne and Tzeentch demons, largely Bloodletters, Bloodthirster, and what seem to be Horrors. Maybe there's a Flamer in there, but I think they're mostly just pink Horrors. And so it's really interesting to see the description of demons from the Tau perspective. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding about what they are seeing. They don't understand what they're dealing with. They interpret all of the demonic energies and magic that they have as technology. Of course, this is the lens through which Tau view the universe, is through technology, through science, as opposed to the arcane or other types of non-scientific, immaterial energies that permeate the universe of Warhammer 40k. The Tau have no knowledge of the warp. They have no knowledge of demons or psychers. And so having this foe that is based purely in those realms is totally foreign to them, and they don't understand what they are dealing with. And this causes panic and quite a lot of problems on the battlefield for them. So it's cool to see that first encounter, that first contact, where Tau are dealing with this foe that is totally foreign to them. There's a scene where Farsight is trying to figure out how to deal with this new threat. And he is talking to Bravestorm, and Bravestorm says they value wealth. Wealth we can give them. And so Farsight, being partially overwhelmed by pink horrors, says to them, he says, we can trade you piles of gemstones. We can lavish you with oceans of gold. Join us for the greater good, and we will. And he gets overwhelmed. He gets cut off. And this kind of desperate attempt at diplomacy is something that is a little bit in contrast to his role as a fire warrior. This type of diplomacy is something that we see more characteristic of the water caste, which, again, is one of the 5 main caste types of Tau society. Tau, of course, are broken up into these different caste systems. If you're not familiar with that, I don't know if this is exactly the best place to go into all that lore. But fire warriors, like Farsight, are military folk. And so this departure from military tactics into bargaining is different. It's not something that we would expect from Farsight, the master of close combat for Tau. So that is something that's really interesting, and I think speaks to just how uncomfortable this situation is for him, right? He's not able to use his standard tricks, and so he's desperate in some ways to find an alternative tactic. And he looks through all of his toolboxes and finds, maybe this is it. Maybe I need to be a diplomat here instead of being a general. And I think it's a nice little tidbit there that really brings some dimensionality to the character and fleshes out this desperation that must be besetting him in such a foreign environment. This book also starts to tease with a connection between Tau, specifically the Ethereals, and demons. If you've been familiar with Tau for a while, there's been a lot of speculation for a long time about what exactly the Ethereals are. The Ethereals are the 5th caste that have united the 4 other castes, earth, water, air, and fire, into what we now recognize as the Tau Empire, into a cohesive society. Before the Ethereals showed up, they were all warring factions, and with Ethereals here, there is control and order and unity amongst the Tau people. And so this is a unique ability of the Ethereals. The Ethereals themselves are pretty different from the other castes. And so people have long wondered, what is the true origin of the Ethereals? Here, there is something a little tantalizing. It says, the commander felt the press of terror upon his chest like tightening bands of steel. Did these aliens somehow know that the Ethereals, the least outwardly threatening of all the Tau present, were the most important by far? Now, that's on page 19, And here there's a connection, and we get a connection later on in the book too, just in the beginning already, that maybe there's something going on here. Why do the demons know that the Ethereals are special? What is it about the Ethereals that are attracting the demons to them? That's a question that the book wants you to ask, and I don't have an answer to it. So I'm hoping that we get some illumination on that as we progress. This being an action sequence, we get a really good practical understanding of how battlesuits function. This is something that we get a little bit in the codex. This is something that we can only speculate on based on the tabletop. But here we have a fleshed out battle sequence where Farsight is commanding his XV8 and doing all the tropey battlesuit type of things. So we get some understanding of what it's really like to be in the cockpit of a crisis battlesuit, or rather, I should say, a cocoon. The book describes Farsight being in a cocoon inside the suit. And I'm not exactly sure how that compares to what we see modeled in things like the Ghost Keel. The Ghost Keel cockpit doesn't really seem to me like the same type of setup that's being described here by Phil Kelly. The Ghost Keel cockpit has buttons, it has screens, it has a seat, right? The pilot is like sitting in it, and it's very mechanical type of apparatus, whereas this cocoon seems to be much more intuitive, not necessarily relying on physical movements or physical button pressing, that sort of thing. All the actions that Farsight is described as doing are described as blink actions. Now, I don't think this means that he's actually like blinking to do everything. That would be ridiculous. You could never see anything. You'd be blinking all the time. But I think it has to do with like eye movements, right? Like there's small gestures that he does that cause significant input to the battlesuit and tell the battlesuit what to do. So this type of blink action is much more cohesive or coherent with the cocoon kind of artificial environment that Kelly describes. And so everything is visually or motion-based as opposed to being a mechanical button or lever that's being pushed like we see in the Ghost Keel cockpit. So that's a disconnect that I would like to be addressed at some point, or at least clarified for me personally. We also find out that Farsight, before he has the Dawn Blade, has a fusion blaster, which makes sense. Farsight is a up-close and personal kind of guy. Fusion blaster is a up-close and personal kind of weapon. So it makes sense that Farsight would have a fusion blaster before he had the Dawn Blade. This is something that I'd actually really like to see brought back. It'd be cool if Farsight had a plasma rifle and a fusion blaster in addition to his shield generator and the Dawn Blade. He's due for a new model, so one can hope. But it also answers a question, like Farsight's battlesuit technically only has a shield generator and a plasma rifle, so what did he do before that? We have an answer now. Overall, the prologue was a great way to set the stage for the novel and give us a glimpse of where Farsight is going. It highlights the horror of reality in the 41st millennium versus the relative blissfulness of Tau ignorance. Tau have so far enjoyed a relative naivety of exploring the universe. They work through diplomacy, they use military force when needed, but they haven't really encountered the true horrors of the galaxy yet, and those horrors primarily lie within the warp, which is foreign and novel to them. So this really shows how there's this dichotomy between the world as Farsight has perceived it and how it actually is. So it shows how Farsight has a long way to go, and ultimately why his worldview will change so severely. How he will go from being a loyal soldier to the Ethereals and the Empire to being the leader of a rebel faction. This instance right here in the prologue is the beginning, or at least the tipping point, for that transformation. And it's a really important point and something that is tantalizing for us. I don't know if I probably used that word too many times at this point, but something that's really exciting for us as readers to see that this is where we're going, and we're going to see this transformation play out inside the novel. It ends on a cliffhanger, of course, of the bloodthirster, delivering a killing blow, or at least a killing blow is referred to. But who is the victim and who is the perpetrator of that killing blow is left ambiguous in the text. Of course, we know as people that have familiarity with Farsight that he lives. So he doesn't die at the end of the prologue, and so we know that the bloodthirster is really the one that's going to be falling here, and not Farsight. So a cool prologue, something that I was really excited to read, and something that hooked me into the novel and got me going down this pretty incessant reading path. So let's move on to Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is Complete Exposition. It's a transmission from an Inquisitor acting as counsel to the Watercast. His name is Vicola Nam Herat. I don't think is going to be important later on, but he is writing this brief on how Tau work 81 years before the events on Arthas Moloch. And this chapter is really cool because it gives the perspective and the perspective of an inquisitor on the Tau and provides valuable information for the uninitiated. And so it's a nice chapter to read if you're familiar with Tau, because it's just cool to see some of this stuff spelled out. But it's also really critical information if you've never heard of Tau before. This is a great primer for how Tau society functions and how the sphere colonization efforts really take place. So really good information. Kind of surprised that this is chapter 1, though. This seems more like prologue stuff or just background information, stuff that, yes, is essential to enter into the story, but chapter 1 just seems like I would want really the story to pick up, more so than just being this transmission. So I was a little confused just reading this about the structure of the book, and that confusion actually continued on to chapter 2 as well. But yeah, so we get a lot of details of how Tau colonization efforts work. First, they build trade agreements with various worlds and conduct that trade at a huge loss. So they don't seek to actually profit monetarily from those transactions. Instead, they're working to basically cultivate an image for themselves amongst the people. They are working to build complacency and basically make the inhabitants of this new world domicile with regard to Tau presence. They take on these huge monetary losses or make these bad deals in order to make the inhabitants of this world view them as non-threatening, right? They build complacency with the populace by cultivating this image of being non-threatening and being agreeable and really allowing the populace to see the benefits of the Tau Empire without having to pay anything for them. And so this puts the Tau in a very favorable light amongst that populace. And once they have that favor, then they can bring in the water caste, and the water caste can start working their diplomatic magic and speaking their truths to the populace. And then the earth caste shows up, and the earth caste starts building stuff. And hey, these Tau really aren't, they haven't caused us any trouble. It would be really great for them to build some buildings here. That way we have better access and better communication between us. And so that Earth caste, build up infrastructure on the planet, and that benefits everyone. So they're happy about that. And then the air caste show up to ferry people on and off planet. And, it just so happens that they bring some warships with them. And then by that point, oh, hey, look, it's, you're part of the empire now. So a very gradual, iterative process that basically doesn't require any bloodshed and is totally this subversive process of building complacency and then gradually weaning the populace away from whatever type of structure they had before and into the society of Tau. And I really love that description. I think it's really cool and gives a lot of flavor to what we understand from other sources. So very, very informative and important to the story. It describes a lot of it really gives us a starting point for not only the Tau Empire in the novel, but also Farsight himself. Farsight is accustomed to this process of the water caste going out and really being the ones that, quote unquote, conquer worlds. And the fire caste is not the primary means of expansion. That's the water caste. The water caste are the ones that do most of the work, and the fire caste do some work when needed, but only as a last resort. So this is a really important point and something that is important to keep in mind as we progress, especially in later chapters. This chapter also explains that Following Tau expansion on the other side of the Damocles Gulf, picking up these enclave worlds, the Imperium started paying attention and pushed back with the Damocles Gulf Crusade. And that crusade was extremely successful from the Imperial point of view. They retook all of those enclave worlds and were pushing into the core sept worlds. But when victories seemed to be all but inevitable for the Imperium, the Tyranid threat became undeniable. And so they had to pull out of Tau space and leave the Damocles Gulf and leave the Enclave worlds ready to be retaken by the Tau. And so this is the state of the Empire as we start the novel, is one that has recently suffered massive losses and is eager to retake the worlds that they once claimed. So that is a huge motivation for the leadership of the Tau, for the Ethereals, for the On, and is something that is going to be driving the events of this novel. So again, really important information and sets the stage for everything that's going to happen and contextualizes the novel chronologically for those of us that are familiar with the Tau story. This chapter also includes some Tau propaganda that the Inquisitor attaches to his transmission. It's basically a political ad. It talks about all the things that are wrong with your world right now as someone that's part of like the Imperium, for example, and all the great things that the Tau can offer you. And so it uses a lot of really dramatic language, a lot of extremely evocative imagery of despair and hardship in contrast to the prosperity of the Empire. And it seems almost like it's straight out of a cult, but it also has a lot of tropes of some political movements. So here in the U.S. at least, and coming out of an election year, some of this resonated a little bit too much. So I thought that was an interesting, quick read of a Tau political ad. So Chapter 2 starts to actually have a bit more of story to it. It's not this document that we're reading through. It's actual contemporary events, and it follows the perspective of a watercast speaker called Porvray Dalith Malcheor. And Malcheor is our perspective character for this chapter, even though he is not Farsight, right? And so this is, again, kind of a weird structure for me reading the novel. Is chapter 2 here is not following Farsight at all, our titular character. And so the prologue, chapter 1 and chapter 2 all kind of seem like background information that is good to have, but isn't really part of the story. And so that's why I'm going to talk about chapter 2 here as well. And then next time we'll pick up with chapter 3, which really starts to show Farsight himself. Malcheor, we can kind of figure out some stuff about him just based on his name. Tau follow this kind of fill in the blank naming convention where the first part of the name, Porvray, means that he is a high-ranking watercast person. So Por means water, Vray is his rank. This is the equivalent rank to the crisis bodyguards or a crisis suit leader, team leader on the Firecast side of it. So you can kind of think of him as being, again, fairly high rank. He's at least middle management type material. Dalith is his homeworld, so he's from Dalith, and Malcheor is his family name. So he likes going by just poor Malcheor or Malcheor because he doesn't like calling attention to his rank, which is an important point, right? Like he has credentials, but he doesn't want them to be on display. And at first that seems more like he wants to be casual with you, wants to be familiar to you. He doesn't want the formality of rank. But later on in the chapter, it seems like maybe that's not the full story. Maybe he does want that familiarity with other Tau, but it might also be that he's a bit, a little bit nervous that he doesn't have the confidence associated with that. And so he views that rank as opening himself up to criticism from his fellow watercast, and he's a little bit embarrassed about that. So I think there's some that we could read into that a lot, and regardless of where we land on that, his actions in this chapter establish him as a very interesting character. When we first meet Melchior, he's been called to assist an Earthcast scientist called Pryfinger. Pryfinger has a piece of technology that has been recovered from the Imperium, and it has some inscriptions on it. Melchior is an expert on Imperial languages, and so Pryfinger needs Melchior to decipher what this says, hopefully being able to glean some understanding of how that piece of technology works. And so when we first meet Melchior, he is presented as this respected scholar, someone that is in charge and informed, and someone that is relatively well liked. So there's lots of likable qualities about him and admirable qualities about Melchior when we first meet him in this context, in the context of him being a scholar and someone that is needed by the Earthcast to, when Melchior arrives, he sees that Pryfinger and a bunch of other Earthcast scientists are studying a scavenged warp drive, that it's part of an Imperial battleship that has been recovered. And there's lots of Earthcast scientists studying it in this big empty room, kind of like, this is kind of like a scientific or sci-fi trope where they have the alien piece of technology and all the scientists are trying to figure out how it works. Kind of like that's that one place in Independence Day, the movie Independence Day, where they have the alien ship and all the scientists are crowded around it. Think about that. That's the kind of scenario that we're talking about here. And so Melchior describes it as an idiot savant engine. And this is a callback to the prologue already, where aliens, people that Tau are trying to bring into the fold, view them as the idiot savants because of the efforts of the Earthcast to kind of undermine this, undermine the skepticism of a populace and to build this complacency. The Tau position themselves as idiot savants, where the aliens view them as not understanding what they are doing, but somehow manage to do great things. They somehow produce these technologies that are wonderful. And this is how Melchior views the Imperium, as idiot savants, where they have this fantastical technology, but they have no idea how it works. They're too stupid to comprehend. And so that's an interesting turn of the tables here. And that parallels some of the table turning that's going to happen in a few pages as well. So really, really interesting writing style there from Phil Kelly. Now, Melchior is looking at this warp drive, and he's trying to figure out exactly what it says. And the Earthcast are starting to pick it apart, and they find that there's organic material in the engine, and they're confused by this. They're like, okay, this is a piece of technology. Why is there bone dust in it? And, we know this. This is a little bit of dramatic irony. We understand why that is. That's because of the psychers that allow the Imperial fleet access to the warp. So Imperial engines are fueled by, human psychers that die in the process of fueling those ships and providing them access to the warp safely. And so that's why there's bone dust and there's all the dead psychers that have been used by this engine. And so Melchior is again confused about what's happening, but he's there to do a job, and that job is to read the inscriptions that are on the side. And that inscription, Melchior deciphers, says, "May the omniscience light bless this housing. The canticles of St. Geller contain its divine aura." Goes on to say, "Empyrean schools, we abjure thee." This is, of course, referring to the Geller field. So the Geller field is something that is created by the warp drive. It prevents demons from tearing the ship apart, from taking over the humans inside, and is what protects the ship as it traverses the warp. And Melchior thinks this is just, funny business, that it's superstitious talk that doesn't actually have any relevant application to the technology that he's looking at. But of course, it really does. It's just phrased in a way that looks, purely religious to him, not relevant. And so having the Geller field be described right here is is important, but it also is where Melchior runs into trouble. The functionality of the Gathered Field to repel demons is exactly what happens to Melchior here. So Melchior is reading this, and he starts to see this black ooze obscure his vision. He can't continue reading because there's this ooze covering the text. And so he carelessly goes to wipe it away. And as he touches that black ooze, he is shot back and is, hurt. He's repelled from the warp drive. And this is weird to me. I don't understand exactly why this happens. Again, teasing the idea that maybe something is off here. He's thrown back by this ooze in a way that I presume would happen to demons if they were to try to enter in the vessel. So, does that suggest some sort of connection between Melchior and demons, or is that just some normal functionality of the warp drive that anything is repelled? For those of you that are more familiar with Imperial technology, let me know in the comments, because yeah, that's some suspicious stuff going on there, I think. After Melchior is pushed back from the drive and injured, we skip ahead 4 days. He's recovering at another site, and we see a stark contrast here in Melchior compared to how he is presented initially in the chapter. Melchior is first depicted as an expert on Imperial language that's respected and well-liked. However, after his incident with the drive, we see that he is looked down upon as simple and overly direct by other watercasts. So there's a difference in how Earthcast perhaps perceive him and how his comrades in the watercast actually perceive him. And so Melchior is harassed by some elite watercast speakers in kind of like a classic schoolyard bully scenario where they're making fun of him. They're saying that he's simple, he's stupid, he's, not cool like they are. He's not eloquent like they are. And he becomes increasingly frustrated with these two watercasts that are harassing him. And he's getting angrier and angrier and, clenching his fist and biting down on his jaw. And he goes back to his room after this incident and sees a vision of a winged serpent. A winged serpent that can spout lies and tell falsehoods like the other watercasts that he is being harassed by, whereas he views himself as being truthful and direct. He views those things as being admirable qualities in stark contrast to the lies that the watercast around him spread. And so, fueled on by this vision of a winged serpent, he cuts his tongue in half down the center in order to give himself a forked tongue like a serpent in this gruesome and bizarre scene, right? Like, not something that I was expecting from a Tau novel, was this self-mutilation. And again, contrasting the horrors of the universe in the 41st millennium to the world of the Tau as they are commonly portrayed. And so Melchior has mutilated himself, and he thinks that now he can speak lies like the other watercasts because he now has the serpent's tongue. And so he returns to Pryfinger and is enraged. He's asking Pryfinger about the purpose of the drive. Why was he asked to be there? Was it all a setup? That sort of kind of paranoid, self-fulfilling argument. And as Pryfinger is trying to reason with him, Melchior murders him. He shoves his hand in his mouth and disinges his jaw, and it's this very gruesome scene, very grimdark, and again, just kind of uncomfortable to read. And so, what is happening here? What is this story? What am I reading? I was here for battle suits and pew pew laser guns, not this. So something that is I would certainly expect from a chaos book, and I suppose much of the Farsight lore is surrounded by demons, so it's not unexpected. Just a little bit of a speed bump here. So, is Melchior just severely disturbed, or is there something else going on in terms of that demonic presence? Is there something going on with that winged serpent, or is it really just that he's losing it? Clearly, this chapter establishes Melchior as an antagonist of sorts, someone that we should be concerned about, someone that we should not just willingly trust, but someone that is definitely separate from the mainline way of thinking for the Tau Empire. So he is someone that we can probably look to provide some insight or say the things that other people won't. And that, may be an asset. It could also be a liability. So it will be interesting to see how Melchior actually plays out here. And so although this is really where the story starts, the structure is confusing. Again, this is a story about Farsight, and we are through the prologue, chapter 1, chapter 2, and he has yet to actually be presented to us now in real time. We have the prologue with him, but we haven't actually picked up with him yet. And so this is almost like a cold open to a crime show like CSI or Law and Order, where Melchior has this incident, and like this has this ominous undertone, and now we're going to kind of pick up with Farsight, who is whistling, going down the street, going about his day, and doesn't know the horrors that await him. And so that's where we will pick up next time, is with chapter 3, and finally get to meet the man, the Tau that we are so deeply invested in, Commander Farsight. So overall, these first few chapters I thought were really cool. I'm excited to progress through this again. I haven't done this type of video before, so let me know what you want from these videos in the comments below, and read along with me. Read the book. It's a pretty easy read. It does not take long to read at all. It's only about 400 pages. So and standard big font type of thing. Read along with me. Let's explore the world of Farsight Crisis of Faith together. And if this goes well, we can keep doing it. So thanks for watching, and as always, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This channel is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there. Special thanks to Durza, Robbie Goodwin, Michael Byrne, Jim Bob, Tao Oswell, Everett Keller, Stephen Cowan, Farsight 1981, Guvesa Webb, Benny B. Jones, Jose Gomez, Ruger, Drew Pratley, Mark Schwering, Zealous Brimstone, Scott Heater, Jared Egler, and Chris Kessler.